Welcome back, my financially frustrated friends, to Boss Economics World. The show where we slice through the government's economic baloney like a hot knife through butter, exposing the chaos, the incompetence, and the downright absurdity of the policies dragging us into the abyss of recession. I'm your host, the guy who's mad as hell about your shrinking paycheck, and today, we've got a doozy of a story that'll make your blood boil and your wallet weep. Buckle up, folks, because we're diving headfirst into the geopolitical cesspool of the Ukraine-Russia conflict, Trump's grand deal-making, and the economic carnage it's unleashing on the global stage. Spoiler alert, your government's mismanagement is, once again, the star of this tragic comedy. Now, if you've been paying attention, and I know you have, because you're the savvy folks who see through the smoke and mirrors, you'll know that President Donald Trump has been flapping his gums about brokering some kind of deal to end the war in Ukraine. Sounds noble, right? But hold on to your hats, because this isn't about peace, it's about power, assets, and a whole lot of economic collateral damage that's going to hit you, me, and the global economy square in the face. Let's break this down, layer by layer, from the surface-level headlines to the deep, dark economic rot beneath. And trust me, by the end of this, you'll be screaming, why does the government keep screwing us over? Let's start with the headlines, shall we? Trump's big plan, folks, is a 30-day ceasefire in Ukraine, which he's been hyping up like it's the greatest deal since sliced bread. We're talking to Putin, he says. We're dividing up assets, he boasts. Oh, and guess what? Ukraine, the country actually being torn apart, might not even get a say in this. That's right, Trump's ready to carve up Ukraine like a Thanksgiving turkey, and Kiev's just supposed to smile and say, thank you, sir, may I have another? But here's the kicker, Putin's playing hardball, refusing to commit to the ceasefire unless his laundry list of demands is met. And what are those demands, you ask? Oh, just little things like keeping all the Ukrainian land Russia's stolen, neutering Ukraine's military, and, get this, making sure Ukraine never joins NATO. Meanwhile, Trump's over here, grinning like a Cheshire cat, talking about power plants and assets, as if this is some kind of real estate deal gone global. Folks, this isn't The Apprentice, this is geopolitics, and the stakes are your economic future. Now, let's peel back the curtain and look at the real economic issues here, because this isn't just about Ukraine, it's about the ripple effects that are going to tsunami their way into your bank account. First off, let's talk energy. Trump casually mentioned power plants in his press conference, specifically the Zaporizhzhia nuclear power plant, which Russia's been occupying like it's their summer dacha. This isn't just a power plant, folks, it's Europe's largest nuclear facility, supplying 20% of Ukraine's electricity and, before the war, a key piece of the European energy grid. Here's the problem, if Trump's deal hands control of Zaporizhzhia to Russia, it's not just Ukraine that suffers, it's Europe, too. With Russia already weaponizing energy by cutting off gas supplies, remember, Nord Stream 2 is dead in the water, and gas flows through Ukraine's pipelines have dropped by over 90% since 2021, Europe's energy crisis is about to get a whole lot worse. According to the International Energy Agency, Europe's energy prices have already spiked by 300% since the war began, and households are paying an average of €3,000 more per year on energy bills. Now imagine what happens if Russia gets to tighten the screws even further by controlling Zaporizhzhia. Higher energy costs mean higher production costs, which mean higher prices for everything from bread to iPhones. And guess who's footing the bill? You, the consumer. But wait, there's more. Let's talk about the global food supply, because Ukraine isn't just a battlefield, it's the breadbasket of Europe. Before the war, Ukraine exported 20% of the world's wheat and 50% of its sunflower oil. But with Russian forces occupying key agricultural regions and blockading Black Sea ports, those exports have plummeted. The UN Food and Agriculture Organization reports that global food prices have risen by 30% since the conflict started, pushing 50 million more people into hunger. And if Trump's deal lets Russia keep those occupied territories, you can kiss affordable groceries goodbye. Inflation, already running at 8.2% in the Eurozone and 6.8% in the US as of October 2024, will skyrocket further, all because our leaders are more interested in geopolitical grandstanding than economic stability. Now, here's where I get really fired up, folks, because none of this economic chaos happens without the government's fingerprints all over it. Let's be real, Trump's obsession with ending the war quickly isn't about peace, it's about optics. He promised to fix Ukraine in his campaign, and now he's desperate to deliver, even if it means selling out Ukraine and tanking the global economy. And let's not forget the Biden administration, which spent 2 years funneling $175 billion in aid to Ukraine, more than the GDP of most countries, without a clear exit strategy. That's your tax dollars, folks, being poured into a war with no endgame, while here at home, the Federal Reserve's jacking up interest rates to 5.5%, making your mortgage, car loan, and credit card debt more expensive by the day. And speaking of the Fed, let's talk about their role in this mess. The war in Ukraine has been a major driver of inflation, with energy and food prices leading the charge. But instead of pressuring the government to negotiate a real, lasting peace, the Fed's response has been to hammer the economy with rate hikes, pushing us closer to a recession. According to the latest data from the Bureau of Economic Analysis, U.S. GDP growth slowed to just 1.3% in Q3 2024, while unemployment ticked up to 4.2%. And in Europe, the ECB's following the same playbook, with the Eurozone teetering on the brink of stagflation, zero growth and 8% inflation. This, my friends, is what happens when governments prioritize political theater over economic reality. But let's not stop there, because the real scandal here is this talk of dividing assets. Trump's out here bragging about negotiating who gets what, as if Ukraine's power plants, factories, and resources are just poker chips in a high-stakes game. And guess who's cheering from the sidelines? Wall Street, of course. Did you catch that little tidbit about Putin allowing U.S. hedge funds like 683 Capital Partners and Franklin Advisors to buy up Russian securities? That's right, while the average Joe is struggling to pay the bills, the financial elite are salivating over the chance to profit off this war. It's economic colonialism, plain and simple, and it's being enabled by government mismanagement on both sides of the Atlantic. Here's the data to back this up. According to Bloomberg, foreign investors have already snapped up $10 billion in Russian assets since Putin's decree, even as sanctions remain in place. Meanwhile, Ukraine's economy has shrunk by 30% since the war began, with $1 trillion in infrastructure damage, according to the World Bank. And yet, instead of focusing on rebuilding Ukraine, our leaders are busy carving up the spoils. This, folks, is why trust in government is at an all-time low. Only 16% of Americans say they trust Washington to do what's right, according to the latest Pew Research poll. And can you blame them? Now, let's zoom out and look at the bigger picture, because this isn't just about Ukraine, it's about the global economic recession that's looming on the horizon, and the government's role in pushing us over the edge. The IMF just slashed its 2025 global growth forecast to 3.1%, citing geopolitical tensions and energy shocks as the main culprits. And here in the US, consumer confidence is at its lowest level since 2021, with 60% of Americans saying they're worse off financially than they were a year ago, according to Gallup. Meanwhile, corporate bankruptcies are up 40% year over year, with small businesses getting crushed under the weight of high interest rates and rising costs. And who's to blame? You guessed it, the government. Whether it's Trump's reckless deal-making, Biden's unchecked spending, or the Fed's sledgehammer approach to inflation, it's clear that our leaders have no clue how to manage this crisis. And the worst part? They're doing it all on your dime, while you're left holding the bag, a bag that's getting emptier by the day. So, there you have it, folks, the Ukraine-Russia conflict isn't just a war, it's an economic catastrophe in the making, and our government's mismanagement is fanning the flames. From energy crises to food shortages, from inflation to recession, this is what happens when leaders prioritize headlines over hard economic realities. And the saddest part? You, the hard-working taxpayer, are the one paying the price, literally and figuratively. But here's the good news, you don't have to sit back and take it. Share this video, sound the alarm, and demand accountability from the clowns in Washington and Brussels who are driving us off this cliff. Because if we don't act now, the next recession won't just be a blip, it'll be a full-blown disaster. This is Boss Economics World, signing off. Stay angry, stay informed, and stay tuned.